Hello and welcome to my review of Cruis'n Blast. All the gameplay you'll see in this video was captured on a Nintendo Switch, and currently the game's an exclusive to that console. And of course, if you enjoy this video or find it useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel. So what is Cruis'n Blast? Well, it's an arcade-style racing game that was actually ported over from a real arcade machine of the same name and expanded with extra content. The arcade machine itself was produced in 2017, but the series does have some history in regards to porting the arcade version to consoles. The original game, Cruis'n USA, was released on the N64 in 1996, and that game also had an arcade version that released 2 years earlier. In fact, a lot of the Cruis'n games have had their roots in the arcades, but there were a few that were console exclusives, like Cruis'n Velocity for the Game Boy Advanced, or the 2007 Wii game simply titled Cruis'n. The series started off as a relatively tame arcade racer, but as time went on, the games became more and more off the wall and crazy. So along comes this game, Cruis'n Blast, which has decided that it wasn't insane enough and takes things to the highest extremes, quite literally sometimes. The game has a pretty simple setup with most of the modes you'd expect: single player, multiplayer, and an extras section where you can view all of the things that you've unlocked. One thing to note is that when you look at this screen, you may assume that the game has online multiplayer, but it actually doesn't. The mode titled multiplayer on the main screen is actually for split screen on the same console, for up to 4 players, and the local multiplayer mode is for multiple players using multiple Switch consoles together wirelessly. The single player section has 4 modes within it, which are Cruis'n Tour, Classic Arcade, time trials, and one-off single races. The original arcade machine had 5 different tracks to play, and they're all included here in the Classic Arcade section. The developers realized that 5 tracks wasn't really enough for a standalone Switch port, so they added the Cruis'n Tour mode, which includes 24 new tracks across 6 tours, which all have their own unique themes. There's tours based on dinosaurs, storms, police chases, and alien invasions. And yes, it is as weird as it sounds. Each tour that you play has 4 races, and once you've completed all 4, you'll be awarded with a bronze, silver, or gold cup. The goal of these tours is to essentially get the gold cup in each one. The tours also have 4 difficulty levels ranging from easy to extreme, and each one has a separate gold cup for you to win. As you complete races, you'll earn cash, which you can then use to purchase different vehicles and upgrades. You can also find and earn cash during the races themselves. You simply need to drive over the icon to collect it, or you can pull off tricks, drifts, and takedowns to earn it that way. You'll also notice shiny keys in preset locations on each track. Every track in the game has 3 of these keys to collect, and these go towards various unlocks. Most unlockable items become available for purchase via collecting keys and completing tours, and all of this is done without any microtransactions whatsoever. As I mentioned, some cars are purchased using keys, and most of them are purchased via in-game cash. The game gives you a choice of some realistic licensed vehicles, including modern hypercars, SUVs, classic cars, and some very weird stuff indeed, like a Triceratops, or a UFO, or a unicorn, because why not? This is how it started, and this is how it ended. The vehicles can all be leveled up by gaining XP from races. The higher you place, the more XP you can earn. First place nets you 1000 XP, while second rewards you with 800 XP, and so on. This can be farmed as many times as you like, with 1000 XP always being awarded for first place, even if you've won that race 100 times. Leveling up actually improves the stats of a vehicle and unlocks cosmetic modifications. Keep in mind that some of the vehicles don't have as many cosmetic options of others, and that's mainly just due to the weird nature of some of them. In regards to the actual cars though, from the moment you pick one, you can change the color, including standard gloss, some mirror finishes, and even some color shifting paints. As the level of the car increases, you'll get access to neon trims, decals, body kits, and some bigger engines that add flames and extra exhausts. As I mentioned earlier, during the races you'll be able to perform tricks, make huge jumps, and drift virtually anywhere. The game wants you to go fast and never wants you to slow down, and to that end, it's very difficult to actually crash. In fact, the worst you can really do is hit a civilian car on the road and get slowed down a little bit. You have access to 3 blasts per race, which are essentially boosts, and you can purchase extra boosts before a race with the spare cash you have if you want to. You can also get a less impressive boost at the end of a good drift, or by driving over ramps jumps laid out on the track. At any time while driving, you can double tap the accelerator button and your car will perform a wheelie, and yes, that's actually a thing in this game. If you do this over a ramp, you'll actually perform a backflip trick, and if you do it right behind another car, you'll be boosted forward and jump over that car, which helps you gain ground. You can also drift over the jump to perform a spin, or you can do a barrel roll if your car is up on two wheels. You can also slam into opposing cars to destroy them in a very Burnout style takedown. You'll gain cash from doing this, but the cars will respawn after a short time. And so at this point, you should have a very good idea about what the game is and how it works. So let's move on to my personal opinions, starting with the positives. So this is a game that I only really heard about through word of mouth. I had no idea this was even releasing until I saw a random post about it on Instagram. I saw a few people saying it was really enjoyable and it was a really good arcade racer, so I decided to give it a try. I have to say, I'm really glad I made that choice. I've always enjoyed unrealistic racing games, and while I do enjoy the odd simulation racing game like Gran Turismo for example, I've always found more fun in the arcade style. Cruis'n Blast instantly reminded me of games like Split Second, which was a PS3 and Xbox 360 era game where you could cause huge disasters on the track that would take out other players. And it also reminded me of the game Pure, which was another PS3 360 era game where you raced ATVs and performed insane jumps and tricks. So I guess the first positive point is just the sheer enjoyment this game gives me. It draws from a time when games were about fun first and foremost. Of course, there's nothing wrong with huge blockbusters or simulation games inherently, but this is a pure pick up and play thrill ride, and I agree with the online sentiment that this may be one of the best arcade races ever made, despite the lack of online multiplayer. And I think the second thing to bring up is the performance. This game runs incredibly well on the Nintendo Switch, like far better than you'd think it had the right to. For the vast majority of the time I spent with the game, I played it on a TV with a Pro Controller, and in that configuration the game runs at a full 1080p and targets 60 FPS. I actually can't play for too long with the Joy-Cons in handheld mode, as I find them so uncomfortable that I might as well just stick my hands in a blender, but I did try one race in handheld mode just to see how it runs, and it's definitely at 720p and still targets 60 FPS. That means that this game is pushing the Switch to its absolute limits in terms of performance, and the great thing is, it achieves it probably, 98% of the time? I rarely noticed any real dips in frame rate, except when you use the blast boost, which covers the screen in some sort of flame effect. The frame rate does dip, but it's weird. It's kind of like, you know when games have an ability that activates maybe on a character or whatever, and you get that brief moment of slow motion? It kind of looks like that, and I actually thought it was just slow motion that they purposefully added there to demonstrate, like the power of the boost. Apparently not, it's actually just a frame rate dip, but it's really not something that's going to bother me at all. Personally, I think the game runs very well indeed, and due to that, it's really quite pleasant to play. And lastly in this section, I just want to say that I really appreciate the overall package. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the music, which is just so cheesy, but good lord, it's that kind of cheese that I love. The game knows what it is and it takes full advantage of those strengths. I think it plays well, runs well, looks great, and has some really fun and unique customization. Not to mention the fact that it isn't a full price game and has a physical copy that's widely available. This term does get thrown around a lot, and I suppose it's for a good reason, but I genuinely believe that in the years to come, this game will 100% be counted as a hidden gem on the Switch. Only time will tell, of course, but if you're a collector for the Switch, I would suggest picking this one up if you're interested. Having said all that, I think it's a brilliant game, but it's not a perfect game. So now let's go over some of the negative points. So to be fair, I really do like the game, but there's some things I wish it had. It's not really about what the game does wrong necessarily, it's more of a case of what I wish it had, if that makes sense. So the first thing I want to mention is that while I love the customization, I really do wish there was more of it. As an example, each car has a good choice of colours, but when it comes to the neon trim, the decals, the body kits, and the engine upgrades, they all only have one each, for each car. So for example, you can see here that I have this car completely maxed out, and because I chose that silver mirror finish that you can see, I have to have the orange neon with it, just because that's the way the game's set up. I mean, it's cool and everything, I like the look, but I really would like the option to change the color of the car and the color of the neon separately. The same goes for other colors too. For example, I'm not sure if this is exactly how it was in the game, but if I was to choose, let's say, a black paint job, it may only let me have, green neon or something like that. The decals are even less customizable. You literally get one decal set per car. You can't do anything with it, you can't change it. I would hope for at least 10 different designs if I'm honest, and have the option to change their colors. You also only get one body kit and one cosmetic engine upgrade per car as well. And again, once you unlock any of these things, your only choices are to either toggle it on or off. I would have personally liked to see, I don't know, maybe at least 3 of each of these for every car. And don't get me wrong, I do like what's here, but I don't think it's too unreasonable to want a bit more. The second thing is again something I wish was in the game, but it isn't. I like the game's tracks. I think their designs are fun, and I think they're pretty cool to play through. There's always a lot to see, there's always a lot going on, but each race is very, very short. I would say roughly between 50 seconds and around 1 minute 50 seconds. I do get that it's an A to B setup and not a track that you do loops on and things like that, but it's just over so quickly, you know? Perhaps if the tracks lasted for maybe 3 to 4 minutes each, I think that would be where I'd be happy. A silver lining to this would probably be that it does lend itself very well to the Switch's on-the-go design. You know, on your commute to work or waiting at the doctor's office or something, you could easily get a good few races in, but for me, I'd like them to last a little bit longer. This last point that I'm going to make is kind of based on what other people might want from this game. So as you know, on this channel, I try to be respectful and consider what other people might want, and so that brings me to the online multiplayer. Now, I personally don't care about online multiplayer. I haven't really cared about it since I was a teenager over 10 years ago. But on the other hand, I know a lot of people love online gaming, and racing games are no exception. Do I want online multiplayer in this game? Nope, not at all. I really don't. Should it be in the game though? Yeah, I think it should. I think a lot of people will assume this game has the option when in fact it doesn't. Even the menus would kind of suggest that it does. And I mean, it's cool that it has couch co-op, which is, you know, somewhat of a dying art these days, but really it should have some kind of online options for those that want it in 2021. In the same vein, I honestly think the game looks more than good enough for what it is. It kind of reminds me of a Dreamcast era game, but playing in 1080p, if you see what I mean. The textures are all very flat and mostly lack detail, but if that's the trade-off that we have to pay to get the performance that we're getting, then I'd gladly accept that deal all day long. Does the game look like Gran Turismo 7? No, of course it doesn't. But at the same time, it doesn't need to. I personally have absolutely no issue with the visuals. I think they work perfectly fine for what they do. But as I said, some people care about this kind of stuff, so I think this could be a negative for some people who are hoping for this game to be a bit more of a looker. And that about wraps up the negatives, so let's move on to the conclusion and the recommendation. For me, Cruis'n Blast is perhaps one of the best arcade races to be released in a long time, and really, my negative points are basically just me wanting more of a game I've already got. As I said, I think it plays and handles really well, I think it looks absolutely fine for the system it's on, and its technical performance is ridiculously good on the Nintendo Switch. On top of that, it's inexpensive, it has an easy to find physical copy, and even though it looks like it would, it has no microtransactions whatsoever. My recommendation for this one is incredibly easy. I really like this game, and if you've ever enjoyed any kind of arcade racing game from Outrun to Split Second to the somewhat recent Hot Shot Racing, then I don't think you'll be disappointed if you pick this up. I really do think that there will be some people who never thought they'd enjoy this type of game that could pick this up and actually have a good time with it. I can imagine that a lot of slightly older gamers, perhaps over 30 like myself, may be more the intended market for this game, as it really does take you back. And ultimately, I think this is a great arcade racer and would probably be a perfect game for parents to share with and play alongside their kids. Who knows, perhaps you'll be able to show them what gaming was like when it was all about the fun instead of the product and the profit. And so there you go, that's my review of Cruis'n Blast. It's available right now for the Nintendo Switch, and it's available via digital download, or you can get yourself a physical copy from most retailers. If you have any questions, or you just have something to say, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, I hope today will be the day that I earn your subscription, and if you want to support the channel even further, all the important links are in the video description down below. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.